Welcome back to the channel. Please stay tuned for the final installment of this video. This is just going to sort of be a preview. I picked 5 books that were among the top favorites out of the whole stack, the whole slew of books that we read in 2023. I hope you guys will enjoy this. Please stay tuned for the live stream that we have coming up at the end of December. And we're basically just going to go live and discuss all of the books that we read. This was a sort of a hard choice to make, just picking 5 books out of the whole entire collection of books that we read this year. But I thought this would hopefully inspire some of you to read. I want this video to inspire some of you into the magic of a lot of these different authors, a little different, some of the different universes that you guys can explore with these wonderful authors. Now, the first contender is Swans Way by Marcel Proust, the first installment in A la Recherche de Temps Perdus, the first installment in Search of Lost Time. And I really got a lot out of this book. Proust is a difficult writer to sort of get under your skin. He takes some time. And when you're reading Marcel Proust, you'll definitely sort of appreciate the way that time influences our lives, how quick life is. But also, not only that, you'll get the whole cast of characters. You'll meet Swann and Mademoiselle Swann, and you'll meet the narrator, and you'll meet the narrator's mother, and you'll meet Odette. You'll meet just the whole cast of wonderful characters that we get in Swans Way. Now, Marcel Proust's writing, I think maybe in a nutshell, if I dare, try to concise Marcel Proust down to something so simple, is the way that he makes you appreciate each and every moment of your life. You don't take any moment for granted. Having said that, there are some passages in Marcel Proust that are put there purposely to make you appreciate the unveiling of the emotional significance and the emotional impact of the real deeper meanings of Swans Way, A la Recherche de Temps Perdus. He was a French writer. Hopefully you guys will do some research on Marcel Proust. So there are some sort of surface level dialogues. There's a lot of ballroom scenes, right? There's a lot of sort of mindless upper class chatter. But when you get underneath all of that, that serves as maybe a ceiling perhaps, or I guess you could say maybe serves as the basis for the deeper meanings of what Marcel Proust is trying to get us, the road that Marcel Proust is trying to lead us down. And it's a road full of emotional introspection. That's what Marcel Proust was so good at. He teaches us how quick life is. He teaches us to sort of enjoy what we see in the moment, enjoy all the relationships, no matter how superficial. And I would say Swans Way, obviously it documents the turbulent relationship between Monsieur Swann and Odette, but there's a lot of other interesting history and introspection about not only the culture that Marcel Proust existed in, but also the way that Marcel Proust, as the narrator, responds to it. And we have the wonderful relationship between the Proust and his mother. We talked about the goodnight kiss. I'm not going to talk too much about any of these books in full detail because I've made videos about most of them, I think. We just did a whole video a couple months ago about Swans Way, so you guys can check out the full video. I'll leave the link in the description. But yeah, Swans Way is definitely one of the contenders for opening up the profound universe of Marcel Proust. Up next, we have John Steinbeck's East of Eden. This was a very, very profound read, a very complex read, but it was definitely a page-turner. There's a wonderful gambit of characters in here. We sort of meet all the interesting characters and all the different sides of the characters that exist in John Steinbeck's East of Eden, sort of in the context of the book of Genesis, right? That's what John Steinbeck was sort of doing. He was sort of offering a modern day retelling of a biblical narrative structure. Having said that, there's a lot of other esoteric levels that you can go down with John Steinbeck. We have Freemasonry. We sort of have government espionage. We have good versus evil. We have the sexual tensions, versus of the man versus the woman. We have sort of the philosophical, spiritual, Gnostic quest, even on some levels of, Adam and, his brother sort of trying to achieve goodness, but always being confronted with evil, always being confronted with corruption. So I would say John Steinbeck's East of Eden, it's a really, really great place to start. It's not an easy John Steinbeck book to kind of approach. A lot of people are used to of Mice and Men and some of the other novels that he wrote. Grapes of Wrath. Grapes of Wrath is pretty intense as well. But I would say East of Eden is probably the most profound and esoteric of the John Steinbeck novels. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in the live stream. I think I might have done a video about East of Eden. If we haven't, we probably will soon. Up next, we have Thomas Wolfe's The Web and the Rock. This is dates from the later period of Thomas Wolfe. This was published posthumously after our dear friend Thomas Wolfe passed away back in 1938. This is one of the most profound Thomas Wolfe novels that you'll ever read. His descriptions are completely viscerally, beautifully disturbing. His narrations are introspective. His narrations and his descriptions of people and places and feelings are just absolutely enormous in their complexity. They're absolutely breathtaking in their universal profundity, I guess you could say. I mean, Thomas Wolfe is not a very, very deeply complex writer on the level of there's not really a lot of esoteric, philosophical, religious themes that you really have to wrestle with. It's basically just one man's struggle to kind of make sense of himself in the world. Good friend Thomas Wolfe there. Just a beautiful, introspective, slightly narcissistic, autobiographical writer. But it's not just Thomas Wolfe himself and the character George Webber that we meet in The Web and the Rock. It's the whole gambit of George Webber's, aka Thomas Wolfe's version over the vast complexity of American culture, American spirituality, American happiness, and ultimately American sadness. So I will encourage you guys to read Thomas Wolfe if you want to get a really, really interesting perspective on not only one man's vision, one man's, sort of narrative, prosaic vision, but also it's almost like a history book of the early 1900s. So I hope you guys will be encouraged to read The Web and the Rock by our friend Thomas Wolfe. Up next, we have something a little bit different, a little more modern. We have The Entity by Frank De Felitta. I have not read a lot of horror novels. I sort of was turned off over the years just by always hearing about Stephen King, right? We only hear about Stephen King and maybe Edgar Allan Poe. But if you read The Entity by Frank De Felitta, you will get a beautiful protagonist by the name of Carlotta Moran. She's supposedly based on a real woman named Doris Byther, and there was sort of a spectral harassment. I don't want to go too much into detail, but a very belaboring experience from a supernatural ghostly force that was forced upon Carlotta Moran. And we get these beautiful introspective sort of just sympathetic perspectives of Carlotta Moran, and we really get attached to the character called Carlotta Moran and as well as her family. And we really want to know what's going to happen to her. And the novel is pretty bleak, I would say, by the end of it, but there's a lot of really, really interesting esoteric elements that you can go down with this. We have Christian Science. We did a whole live stream about the horror novels that we read. I will post the link in the description so you guys can explore the different elements that we were able to extract from the Frank De Felitta's The Entity, but just a beautiful version of a horror novel. It's not a slasher. It's not like a Stephen King type thing. It's kind of in the vein of Stephen King, but Frank De Felitta was really kind of his own thing. He was more like an esoteric specialist, I guess you could say. Just a lot of really, really profound things in here. You guys can see all the notes that we took. Some of them are falling off of my book here because we've got so many, but just a beautiful version, a beautiful retelling of a horror novel, of a supposedly real life case scenario. Now, we went into some speculation on the live stream about how some of it was probably not true. It might have just been some kind of Freemasonic, occult propaganda, right? We talked about that in the live stream, but just as a novel, it's a beautiful exploration of the occult, as well as one woman's experience with trying to unveil and come to terms with her trauma, her sexual trauma, her relationship trauma, her religious trauma. So make sure you guys check out The Entity by Frank De Felitta. Lastly, but not leastly, we have Pulp by Charles Bukowski. This was a really, really fun read. It was a really, really profound read considering Bukowski. Not that Bukowski is not a profound philosophical writer, but he tends to sort of dwell closer to the earth. He's more in the vein of Hemingway, or Dostoevsky, and obviously those writers have a lot of profundity to their prosaic narrative, but I would say that Bukowski is just a lot of fun to read. Having said that, Pulp was a little bit more deep as far as Bukowski's sort of philosophy goes. It wasn't just the same Henry Chinaski character. We almost saw this character in Pulp that was facing his own mortality on a lot of different levels. He was facing his sort of creative mortality, but he was also facing his sexual long-lasting mortality on a sexual level. What does a man do with his sexual lust when he's too old to really act on it? What does a man do when he's too old to drink? What does a man do when he starts to really face death? And we have this wonderful character called Lady Death in here that Charles Bukowski introduces us to. And it was just a really fun read. Some of it is a little bit off the wall. I think Charles Bukowski was probably going a little nuts, or maybe he was just kind of sort of presenting this a little bit more complex narrative with different characters and different realities in order to get us to think a little bit deeper. I think Pulp gets a little closer to some of Charles Bukowski's idols like Dostoevsky and Dos Passos, and maybe even I don't know, some of the other writers that Charles Bukowski was influenced by. Maybe that he was a little bit too shy to there's some references to Dante in here. There's also some references to Celine. Celine's another good reference if you want to get into sort of Bukowski's worldview. So we still have the same sort of chaotic, depressive, but also sort of motivating worldview of the Henry Chinaski character, but it's sort of told in a different way where there's more characters, there's different sort of time zones that he jumps back and forth between. There's different perspectives, and it's still this. It's basically Henry Chinaski, but it's told through the guise of Nick Billane, I believe, is the protagonist in this, which is basically a loose version of Charles Bukowski or Henry Chinaski, but it's told in more of a Pulp Fiction sci-fi sort of realm. So it's maybe a little bit more complex on that level, I would say, than just Women or Post Office. Those novels are very straightforward. There's really no underlying particular themes that kind of go through there that you don't really have to really philosophize or do a whole lot of analysis. I think it would be interesting to do more analysis of Charles Bukowski, but having said that, I think I'm drawn to Pulp to do the analysis because it's a little bit more coded. And Charles Bukowski did not often really code or hide his intentions as well as he kind of did in Pulp. And I think there's a lot of different, maybe slightly esoteric Freemasonic references in Pulp that we could unpack. So that is basically the preview for the live stream that we're going to be doing at the end of December. Please let me know your thoughts and comments at the end of this video. Let me know what books you all have conquered in the year of 2023. We're fast approaching 2024, and the reading schedule is going quite well. I do have some videos and some analyses planned for you guys upcoming very soon. So thank you so much for joining. Make sure you guys like this video and subscribe. It really helps me to know that these are the kind of videos that you all are interested in. Follow me on Instagram at Andrew Marlowe Artist Official. Send me an email at andrewmarlowe22@gmail.com. Happy reading.